Hey everybody, it's your friend Adam. I'm here with Dialogue Always. He's been on my channel a couple times before. He went by the name Lozar1, and I noticed you changed your name to Lessons Learned, which I like. Lozar is a little too close to loser for my taste, so maybe you took my advice on that.
No, I wanted to keep it low, star, but I chose lesson learned after our conversation. Like, yeah, would have like maybe just change the name, lesson learned.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I don't know. What do you mind using your first name? Do you have a name that I can call you, or what do you want me to call you? Dialogue? I can call you Dialogue.
Yeah, dialogue's fine.
Okay. So you can call me Adam, obviously. And Dialogue here is a giant progressive. Okay. He's constantly sniping at people on Twitter. He follows pretty much every progressive YouTuber, you know. I was telling Dialogue before we began that for some reason I trust this guy. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm making a mistake. Maybe he's as bad as Jangles. Somehow I don't think he is. I think his heart is in the right place. I think we just disagree on politics. So, but I have like 4 questions I want to ask you. But before we get started, you mentioned um, you had watched our debate,
Yes.
well, our Jangles debate, and you wanted to talk about that for a second. You want to
No,
give your feedback on the debate.
oh no, I was just laughing because you got a bit heated there, buddy. Like,
I did. See, this is the thing. I was not heated at all. I was just hamming it up for the camera. I was having fun.
with, I was kind of laughing about it because at MythCon,
Mhm.
or at Myth Thing, I was laughing because there the whole time I was like, "Hey, Jangles, you're getting kind of heated there, buddy." So like, just to watch Jangles on the other side, like I expected him to be a little mad, but you were kind of mad. So I'm like, "Oh, okay."
So,
It's just funny to watch.
so how was what was your take on the performance? Obviously, you're on Jangle's side with critical race theory, and I think the last 2 times I had you on, I think we might even talked about critical race theory. So,
Yeah, we kind of got into like I think the first conversation was just an overview, and the second one was trying to figure out what they meant by color blindness.
right, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm still pretty much where I stand with critical race theory, to where um, the aspects of it that are in college courses are absolutely okay. We can, I'm I don't like some of the offshoots. Never did. I don't. And I think if you talk to most leftists or liberals, they don't like the offshoots. They don't like the DEI stuff.
What does
Um,
DEI stand for?
Diversity,
Oh,
something and
okay, I got you.
inclusion. But it's
Diversity, equity, inclusion. Yeah.
yeah,
So you are
basically
not
it's
for diversity, equity, inclusion.
I'm not for the classes and that people are being forced to take in order to feel better about themselves, because
Okay.
it's only designed for corporations or organizations to protect themselves in case something happens, and I don't think that
Yeah,
that's a good way of doing anything, to use it as a defense, to have people sitting in a room and giving them an overview that it confuses them more than
I agree.
if you just hadn't did it in the first place.
Did you watch my talk with Dave the Distributist where I talked about unwoke diversity trainings and he basically lost his mind? Like there can't be any unwoke diversity training.
Yeah, I didn't see that,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't distributors. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
thinking of a different distributist, because I couldn't. I like last distributist I got into a conversation with. I don't think he was anywhere near on the side of CRT. So
I don't think he is either. Fozimo is exactly right. Protect themselves from civil rights lawsuits. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
mhm.
Riggs for $5 says, I'm going to watch this tomorrow at work. A train all aboard. Yeah. Thanks, Riggs. Thanks for the $5. So, yeah, we're also, just so you guys know, there is uh, Dialogue has agreed to watch a video that I have to admit I picked because I think it's going to trigger the shit out of it. And I'm curious to get his feedback. I was watching it and I was like, hand on my heart, inspired as an American watching this. It's a conservative commentator. And I never heard of this guy before, but I saw him on Michael Shermer's show. So I started watching a bunch of his vids. And this vid I actually sent to Akira the Don. I was like, add this to your found objects file because the stuff he says in here is pretty inspirational. But I'm curious because you're such a progressive, what your take will be on it. So, but I have the opening questions that I have, and you don't have to answer these. Okay. I don't want to get any got yous with you, but I am curious just from a open dialogue perspective. The first one is, dude, why are you so mean to my buddy Sitch on Twitter? Why can't you just be nice to Sitch? He's my bro.
To be honest, and I think I've said this before, I have a bit more respect for you than I do for Sitch.
Why? Why?
And Sitch likes to play a game, and I've seen him do. I've seen him do it quite a bit. Where when somebody's not across from him, or if he's kind of doing stuff on his own, where there's not someone to immediately challenge him, he is very aggressive, very this is the left. This is what's wrong with the left. Leftists are this and this and this. Like he's kind of over the top. But then when he like says like "fuck you" on Twitter, I'm like, stupid people. Da, da, da. But then when somebody's across from him and like, hey, Sitch, you said this and this and this, you're wrong. Then he becomes a lot more nuanced, a lot more. Well, what I mean is this, and I might be a little. And I'm like, come on, man, like. At least be the same person when you're talking behind or not behind their back, when you're talking on stream or when you're posted on Twitter, that you are when the person's right across from you. Like, don't all of a sudden soften your tone, soften your rhetoric. Like, I'm the same person talking to you now that I am on Twitter. Like,
this is called code switching dialogue, I've heard.
I mean, and regardless of what it's called, that's the only reason why I kind of look up like. There's two things. One, he does that, and two, he makes rules for one side that he finds acceptable. That when it happens to the other side,
is that distracting? I won't do that anymore, man.
No. I'm sorry. I wasn't reading that. I was just trying to think.
Okay.
He makes rules. So if somebody says like, "This is the right wing," is, like the right wing is nationalist, and nationalist is a step away from white supremacy. Like if somebody said that, Sitch would quickly be like, hey, that's messed up, that's wrong. You could be nationalist and not white supremacist. That's very mean. What are you doing? But then somebody will go, yeah, you're a leftist, and because you're a leftist, you're a Marxist, and because you're a Marxist, you want to steal everybody's property, you want to redistribute property rights. Then all of a sudden Sitch is like, well, okay, that's acceptable. And I'm like, no, hold on, man. Like, if it's wrong for one side, why isn't it wrong for the other?
Well, this might be a Sitch's law here. This might be a miscommunication over definitions, because when Sitch says leftist, he means communist. He means Marxist. He means someone who is for redistribution. And a lot of people, and I tell them this all the time, I'm like, a lot of people say leftist and they just mean progressive. They mean someone on the left.
Yeah, I'm more progressive. Like when I say leftist, I mean progressive. I don't.
Yeah, so it's just a miscommunication then.
Yeah, but when you try to point that out to Sitch, he kind of well, let's see. There was a conversation with me, him, and Jeff Holiday, where even Jeff Holiday kind of pointed out one of the ones where he posted up a thing about Ahmaud
This wasn't a conversation. This was a Twitter exchange.
Yeah,
right?
A Twitter exchange, where even Jeff kind of looked up and was like, "Come on, man! Like, if it's wrong for the right, it's got to be wrong for the left. If you mean communist, say communist. If you mean white nationalist, say white nationalist. But if you're sitting here and saying the left, the left, the left, the left, and then somebody says the right, and now you're triggered by it, like that's not fair in any way, shape, or form, you know." So I think that's the only issue I have with you, at least. Like, I completely disagree with a lot of the things you say, but at least you're you're like, no, this is what I believe, you know.
Yeah, and also like you say, I'll tell someone to fuck off on Twitter and to their face. My telling people to fuck off to their face cred is unassailable, especially after the Jangles debate. Even though I got so much shit for that, and I didn't feel like I was that over the top, but
you
okay.
you came. I'll say this: you came in swinging. You
Mhm.
did come in swinging, and from that point on, you came in swinging. So obviously, Jangles got defensive. So most of his reactions is in a defensive tone, and then from then on, it was kind of like a because he's defensive, you're defensive. Why is Jangles defensive? Why don't you just answer the question? And Jangles is like, well, you came in swinging, so I
Mhm.
don't know what you mean by this. So I'm
Did
defensive the whole conversation. So it was just you did kind of like
I know I started it. I did. I admit it. Did you know that Jangles retweeted like somebody clipped Sitch out of context and shared it and Jangles retweeted it, which
yeah,
is totally dishonest.
I heard that happen. I didn't get a chance to even see.
Yeah, I listened to the tweet. It's totally out of context.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think the only part that I think I put this on Twitter where I got kind of annoyed with was when Sitch kept saying like, "Hey, I'm trying to get Jangles to say that CRT is leftist." Um and because no one admits that CRT is leftist. And we're all like, well, we admit it's leftist, and we'll even admit that there's Marxist elements of it. But you're trying to play this game of like it's Marxist, then we'll take a step to like property rights, where it's like, no, something can be Marxist by just identifying group dynamics and power dynamics, but it doesn't mean that it's instantly moving towards the Marxism in the sense of taking property rights and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
that's a difference that I take to heart because the property rights thing is the thing that bugs me.
yeah. Um so and also a lot of the papers written under CRT, like because CRT is more a movement than it is a class or anything else, is are written in the abstract. I know it's going to immediately
I
annoy people
know.
saying this, but it's written in the abstract of like instead of saying this is what needs to be done, it's written in the sense of like, well, if something wants to be done in this way, here's a view on it of how we think that it would be done the fastest. And that may be absolutely untrue or whatever else, but so that's where I know he has an issue with quote unquote power levels, but when there's so many different people talking in a field, you're gonna have a combination of different types of people and different
You
perspectives.
have an issue with the right hiding their power levels, though, right?
Depends. It really does. I could care less about power levels in the sense of I don't know, like hmm,
Here,
in
I have
like
a. Oh, go ahead.
their
Sorry.
own sectors. Like if you're in your own sector and you're a certain way or whatever else, and you're not trying to change how the world sees something, yeah, fine, be whatever you want to be. It just bothers me when you're presenting yourself as something and you're an influence and you've taken some of the perspectives of the right that you know go a certain way, but you want to pretend like it doesn't. That's the only thing that bothers me. And leftists do it too. CRT has a lot of people that do that too.
Yeah, it's dishonest.
Definitely. And I can't argue again, I said this last time we talked. I can't argue against some of the people who have decided to take it out of the class or take it out of college
Mhm.
and try to pull it into classrooms and tell young kids that they should feel bad for stuff that people like that's kind of messed up. Now,
Okay, good. That's progress right there.
but
A
what
lot
I
of people
am
won't admit that it's even that people are trying to do that.
well, yeah, I mean, there are people trying to admit that it's not trying to do that. There are certain people, but I'm not seeing it as much as it's being presented.
Mhm.
And I am kind of seeing a counter reaction that should be troubling to a lot of people, especially on this side, where there are teachers and administrators being fired that have absolutely nothing to do with many of the accusations made with CRT. And just, I mean, that should.
Why are they getting fired?
Well, for example, the principal, and I think in like Texas or something like that, first black principal for the school district, somebody accused him of trying to administer CRT, and he got fired because of the accusation.
You think it was a false accusation?
It was a false accusation. Like, it wasn't even, I think it was. I'll see if I can find the name of the guy.
So but, the left or the right is doing the same thing the left has been doing. Like, the left commonly makes bogus charges of white supremacy or racism or homophobia or sexism, and then they get somebody fired. Now the right is doing the same thing, where they're making false accusations of critical race theory and then getting people fired.
Yeah. And that's where I would say, like, if we're being consistent, there should be a stance where it's like, okay, we can't just get people fired if we can't even prove something happened. You know, just because we're challenging against what we think critical race theory is, we shouldn't just start willy-nilly firing people before even finding out if he did anything wrong.
Sitch says leftist includes anarchists and those far left non-Marxist types. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you mean. Sitch, if you want to, if you don't mind, if Sitch comes on, I mean, I don't want to.
Well, I mean, it's not up to, it's fine with me. Last I remember, he didn't want to talk to me. So
I don't know. I don't know if you want him to come on. He's like, look at this. Laters, enjoy dishonesty always.
Like I said, it's not my side.
This is hilarious. This is hilarious. What's going on here?
I don't like him, and he doesn't like me, and that's what it is. We just don't like each other.
Is this the same? This is like you're his Jangles. Oh my god!
Yeah,
my god!
Yeah, I don't.
Can I ask you for a favor, man? I'm serious. Shoot. Bury the hatchet with Sitch. Jeez, come on.
I mean, it is what it is. Like, I'm not going to. I have no hatred for the guy, and if he came on, I'd be more than willing to talk to him. But I don't have much respect for him right now. Like, if we talked and came to some type of conclusion or whatever else, I might change that.
What happened? Now, what tweet storm what did you say? What did you do? Why does he feel this way?
It's been a series of things. Like, Sitch did the thing that had me. All right, so for a long time, I was I like the skeptics. I would watch the skeptics and stuff like that. And there was this one tactic that I didn't like that the skeptics kept doing. I already told you much about it, where they would make these bold, overreaching general statements about people they disagree with. And then when they get called on it, suddenly they become incredibly nuanced. And it's like, well, this is what you said in your video. This is what you said in your tweet. This is what you said in your stream by yourself. But now somebody's questioning you about it. And now suddenly you're this nuanced person. Like,
well, so many of those accusations were fake, though. I mean, they make fake accusations about Sargon all the time. All the time. Vadim is like making videos that are just like total fucking bullshit.
I'm gonna leave the Sargon door closed because again, Sargon, he's gonna always be Sargon. I don't think I'm gonna change my mind on Sargon. You have your opinions on him. I'm gonna leave that there. But
you do understand that people are making false allegations against not just Sargon but other people as well.
Sure, but I kind of see it more as two people with swords fighting. Like, I don't.
Yeah,
I don't
but
see
the dishonesty is the problem, though. The dishonesty is the problem. I want them to fight. I want them to engage. I want a vigorous debate, a vigorous clash of ideas. I wouldn't have done that debate if I didn't want that. The thing that pissed me off was that we weren't having a clash of ideas. We were having just a like, what were we having? I don't even know. Jangle's position is completely unclear.
Oh, I saw it as clear, but I can't speak completely for Jangles, but I mean I saw it as clear because his is close to mine, to where
This is a disagreement you and I had, because I completely disagree with you.
yeah. And I mean I he has one kind of close to mine, to where surface level, the tenets of CRT, many of the things that are more, like I said, the surface level introductions of CRT are things that I agree with. Um, things that are mostly pushed are things that I agree with. But yeah, there's the darker underbelly that none of that I can't defend or Jangles can't defend.
Right. Let's
Um,
just real quickly, okay? Because this is the debate that we had, and Jangles' position, I would say, you're saying it's similar to yours because both you and Jangles believe that CRT, or critical race theory, is an extension of the civil rights movement. It's working towards getting equality for all Americans.
um, I mean, okay, so extension of the civil rights movement is, I would say yes, but
Mhm.
I don't think. What do you mean by extension? I want to make sure we're on the same page of
Well,
extension of civil
this
rights,
was the debate,
because
because Sitch and I fundamentally disagree. I think that the civil rights movement was founded on the idea that we were going to fight negative stereotypes, and that's how we were going to achieve equal opportunity. That the negative stereotypes about black people were what was standing in the way of people providing the same opportunities they were providing for white communities. But
okay, so
instead of continuing that fight against negative stereotypes, the CRT people basically say you're never going to avoid negative stereotypes. Black people always are going to have these negative stereotypes on them. And the thing that we have to do is we have to create negative stereotypes about white people to fight against it, which then I'm like, okay, we're just going to have a fucking stereotype war.
um, okay, so you mean kind of the surface level, what most history books would say about the civil rights era, and I can kind of see you saying that CRT isn't that. I would say CRT is more along the lines of the stuff least read by Dr. King
Mhm.
or Abernathy or many of the people in the civil rights era. The more I would say more of the stuff that focused on the economic portions of it, how society shifts towards it, the arguments that you'd have to search to find, like Dr.
Mhm.
King's argument that many blacks were excluded from a lot of the social programs
Yeah.
of the early
Re-
19th century
we don't
and
disagree
or the
on any
early
of that.
20th century. Well, the difference is Dr. King would say it in the sense of until something, well, okay, and this is what from what I've been reading from him, until that is acknowledged, just saying, okay, well, we're all the same, racism's gone, I don't see race, doesn't change the fact that we still live in a country that is deeply divided based on how our country was formed, how certain people got to where they got to, how certain families started out. So until that's at least addressed, all the I don't see race or I don't see color or anything else like that is just empty. I guess
Rhetoric.
like yeah, empty rhetoric.
Yeah,
And
that's what you're looking for. I I I mean, I felt you would at least admit that we've made progress, right? Some people act
oh,
like civil rights is not even didn't
de-
even make any progress.
definitely. And from our conversation before, that's why I was saying there's a difference between um whether or not there was like a hatred towards blacks or a hatred towards whites. So we've made progress in that sense, and seeing how certain decisions have affected different groups, and then looking at the statistics, of how they affect different groups and trying to find a different excuse for them. And that's where there's a lot of issues.
Cullivar for $5 says, what does Dialogue consider himself politically online and then politically to a normie? There's a difference. I mean, maybe there's a difference. I'm not sure that there would be a difference for me, but
I mean, I guess online and to a normie, I'm a left of center progressive.
But you're not a communist, though.
No.
Right.
Well, I mean,
you're for a welfare state, but you're not for the abolishment of property rights.
Yeah, I'm for. Now, I would say this: I am capitalist in most situations, socialist in a select few, and then communist in your home life, or in communist in the way you move around the world. So, communist in the sense of whatever you do to help the benefit of the people around you. So I would say that more than, but I would say that would have to be a personal choice. I'm not saying any government step in, but communist in the sense of, all right, if I have 1,000 tomatoes, I'm not going to eat 1,000 tomatoes, no matter how big I am. I see somebody that needs tomatoes, help them out.
Redistribution.
But I see it as just making that type of decision.
So the questions that I have, I want to ask you about some stereotypes. My audience knows I freak out about stereotypes just because I don't feel like stereotypes are useful, and stereotypes really fuck over people who are against the stereotype, because obviously, and also I feel like stereotypes are usually such a tiny minority of a population. It's not even really useful. So do you have a stereotype for progressives? What is your typical progressive look like to you?
Oh,
and not necessarily, in attitude or behavior, not in appearance, obviously.
That's a hard one, because I would say that there's a difference between the progressives that are public for the world to see and just progressives in day-to-day life. Progressives in day-to-day life are just people who have leftist ideas but pretty much move the way that everyone else moves. So you won't really be able to tell a progressive because we kind of move like everyone else.
But is there like I'll give you some of mine, but I want to get your reaction first. Like, is there like a word that describes a progressive in one word?
I don't think so. I'm other than progressive, I don't think so.
What does progressive mean then?
Progressive, well, again, I can only give the one that I've learned.
But this is a stereotype that you have in your head of a progressive. Like, I have a stereotype of a progressive that is like a certain way, a certain attitude about life.
Yeah, a progressive will always see that people are mostly capable of being able to act on their own, do on their own, but greed is a thing, and greed needs to be curtailed. And if greed is not curtailed, it does lead to bad decisions that harm a lot of people. So there has to be some sort of check for greed. And a progressive, depending on who you're talking to, would take it a step further than the laws that we have right now.
So they're anti-greed. Is that
for the most part? Yeah.
Okay. So what anti-greed is what they're against. Is there something that they're for? Is there something they're in favor of? Something that is
I don't think there's anything that they're for that would be specifically progressive, just for most of the things that most people are for. People having happy, healthy lives. I guess the one split off that progressives would have from other groups is we're less on the blaming individuals for every one of their problems thing.
Oh, that's good.
We're a lot more towards there are certain elements of the world that are unexpected or unknown, or just maybe if you had a bad decision, there should be something to help you stay on your feet that's not we're making you, like you made the decision, sleep in it. You know, just let's try to get you back on your feet so you could still be a productive member of society. And that's where we're kind of more motivated towards a bigger safety net than many other groups would be.
Do you know Moral Foundations theory? Do you know Jonathan Haidt?
Not really.
Okay. So I would agree. Well, first, before I give you mine here, I'll give you some of the chat just for entertainment value because it's pretty hilarious. Did you see everyone? I don't know if you even brought the chat up, but God, these guys, you guys are fucking comedians. Okay. I love the fact that this is a comedy show. We got hippie, whiny, stupid, fascist, possessed, authoritarian, beta, hubristic.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say I would say caring the same way that you would say caring. You did kind of say forgiving. And I think, okay, progressives might be, I don't see progressives as forgiving. My stereotype does not allow me to see progressives as forgiving.
Well, in a specific section. So I do admit
right.
we're more forgiving in the sense of like if you made a decision that led to a financial issue, we'd be more forgiving to try to help you get back on your feet. But yeah, definitely. Especially recently, I'm gonna full on admit that
no one's forgiven Trump for anything.
But he shouldn't really. Oh well, let's not open that door. let's keep that door closed.
So, but you did say they want people to live happy, healthy lives. So now let's do the same thing with conservatives. What's your stereotype of a conservative?
Reactionary, definitely reactionary.
What does that mean to you? Because I'm not sure I know.
They kind of want to stay with the status quo, even if it's counterproductive, or even if, you know what, let me not make a generalization. Even if I feel it's counterproductive for them, because again, I'm not perfect, but I'm
what
just
kind of status quo?
In the sense of,
I mean, all this wokeness in schools. I don't think they want to stay with that status quo.
Well, no, but all the wokeness in schools would be something that would be introduced against the status quo. You know, the status quo before was George Washington chopped down the cherry tree. Slavery was a paragraph. We said a bunch of stuff about Dr. Martin Luther King, mostly the last few sentences, the Mahalia Jackson version of the I Have a Dream speech. We moved to talk about World War II for the next 3.5 hours, and then, American history. Like.
So you think conservatives want to whitewash American history?
Not whitewash, but preserve the way it's already been taught because it matches up with American exceptionalism. And I think there is a deep fear that anything that challenges American exceptionalism challenges, even if, and this is my opinion, I can't give anybody else's opinion. Even if it's more accurate than American exceptionalism, just the challenge in itself, they would see as I would say anti-American.
Could all those terrible things be true and America still be exceptional?
Yeah, but when I say American exceptionalism, I should have put air quotes up. By American exceptionalism, I mean like this idea that almost this fairy tale idea of America, where a lot of the stories are told in a hero and villain sense instead of being told in just this is how the way things are.
Well, there were people who fought on the Underground Railroad to free slaves, and we fought a war over slavery. So, I mean, how is that not heroic?
Sure, but that's one part of it, but that shouldn't be the only thing taught, because then it kind of hides away like a lot of the things that the war started over. Like we talk about slavery now as the cause of the Civil War. Sure, but when you look deeper into it, the South fought to preserve slavery, but the North fought to preserve the Union. And in every sense of the matter, if the South just said, well, you know what, we'll keep slavery, we'll We'll stop fighting right now and rejoin the Union. Just leave us and our slaves alone. Abraham Lincoln would be more than happy to bring him in. Now we can argue.
So you buy into the fact that the Civil War wasn't fought to free the slaves. The Civil War was just fought like
it wasn't started to free the slaves. Now eventually it became a slave ending effort, but in the very beginning, it was just the North was fighting just to preserve the Union. And there's a whole lot of documentation to show that Lincoln, as much as he didn't like slavery, and we could say like the day after slavery could have been abolished or whatever else, we don't know. The war started just solely to preserve the Union.
Would it be better? Because there is the Hannah Nicole. Is it the Hannah Nicole Jones? Who did the 1619 project? It's Hannah Nicole Jones, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So would it be better? Different historians have come out and said this is a bunch of horseshit. It didn't go down this way. She's concocting a fictitious narrative about American history. Would it be better if we had obviously sticking as close to the historical facts as possible, if we framed the historical narrative in a way that was constructive for both blacks and whites? So it was a narrative that both whites and blacks could be proud of. Would that be a good thing? Or
I don't think history should be taught in any way, shape, or form to feel pride or guilt or anything else. It should just be taught. So whatever happened should be.
But it is being taught. I mean, the whole purpose. But the whole purpose of the 1619 project is not to valorize black people. The purpose of that is to create negative stereotypes of white people. That's the goal of it.
I haven't seen that. And to be honest, the only thing I've seen were the issues with the 1619 project were two parts of where she tried to, instead of saying that many of the southern states fighting during the Revolutionary War also fought for kind of a slavery preservation thing, but it was not as significant as the causes for the Revolutionary War. I think she took that a bit too far and tried to claim that slavery was a large part of the Revolutionary War. That was redacted and fixed, but after the redaction, I haven't seen much criticism of the 1619 project. If anything, I've seen more people avoid the now released books of the 1619 project because there hasn't been much in the books that they could disagree with.
Well, I haven't read them, so it's difficult to have a conversation on them without reading them. I don't know if you've read them, but my intuition though is that the goal of CRT is to create negative stereotypes about white people. Exactly like I said, the dynamic is blacks have been wrongly all of these negative stereotypes of blacks have been wrongly placed on this community, and in a retribution type of way, culturally powerful blacks are going to settle the score by creating negative stereotypes of white people. And I think the whole whiteness, all this whiteness stuff, all this privilege plus power stuff is meant to create negative stereotypes about white people. And I see a situation here where both sides are doing their best to just create negative stereotypes about the other. And we're going to lose all of the progress that we've made in the last 20 years dealing with the negative stereotypes about blacks. I'm sure you've dealt with these negative stereotypes before. Maybe you haven't. I don't know where you've lived. I mean, when I lived in the South, I definitely know blacks were dealing with negative stereotypes.
So I don't, the privilege versus power thing, I can definitely see. The whiteness thing. Okay, so this is probably going to end up, I hope we don't get into an argument over it, but the whiteness thing, I think, is a complete misunderstanding. What whiteness meant was to define a lot of the things that were presented as white in the past to justify certain actions. So back when like the Native Wars, back with slavery and stuff like that,
Well,
there was a real understanding that a lot of this was wrong. So a lot of decisions were made to try to justify it by making certain claims. Oh, they're not like us because they have these qualities and we have these qualities that make us white and make them other. So that's what, when people were saying, well, when most, I can't even say when most, when people that are properly using whiteness are saying, they're talking about those decisions and how those decisions have moved throughout have been picked up throughout history.
The origin of them, though, is immaterial to the result of them. And I'm saying that the result of how they're being used is to create negative stereotypes of white people now. White people are oppressors, white people are racists, white people are hillbillies.
It can be, definitely.
Yeah. And that's just a bad situation to be in.
Yeah, so. And I would say this. And I've said this to you before. The worst thing that could ever happen is a lot of these conversations leave the classroom. Mm-hmm. Because in the classroom, when you're writing a paper and you're putting in whiteness in the sense of trying to limit what I just said whiteness was. Like, to not have to write that long paragraph of information pertaining to how people justified the actions they did in the past. Mm-hmm. But trying to explain that to lay people, to people who don't study this stuff or haven't taken even a 5-second cursory glance at it, definitely I can see that as someone picking up and going, okay, well, they're saying I'm X or I'm Y because I'm white, and that's kind of messed up.
Listen, you know? The disagreement that we're having here, just to make it clear, and we are disagreeing. Mm-hmm. You're saying that these high-minded, you're basically saying the exact same things Jangles said. You're saying these high-minded academics are just writing this stuff about whiteness because it's just them talking among themselves. And they did, if inadvertently they started creating negative stereotypes about white people, it was completely unintentional. Okay.
No. The people that write them as whiteness equals white people, the Robin DiAngelo type of people, mm-hmm. They are absolutely horrible. And I mean, there's no.
So you admit they're trying to create negative stereotypes.
They are definitely
okay,
like full on, because of their, for lack of a better term, vapid laziness.
But that's not good though, right? We should try not to do that.
Yeah, that I'm fully for dismantling anything that Robin DiAngelo writes in that aspect. And I'm fully for calling her out for that, because that is absolutely ridiculous. Okay. I'm also highly against a lot of the black nationalist aspects that lean towards white bad, black good type mm-hmm. of arguments. Yeah, they're destructive. But for the people who are saying, but I'm, for my defense, for the people who are using whiteness properly, it's to
what is the proper way to use it?
Well, like the way that I defined. So this might actually trigger.
I know. I'm like, but, listen, what is let me know, be sure to let me know the proper way to use blackness when you're done using whiteness.
Sure. So you've watched comedy for a long time.
Yeah.
You've watched black comics, right?
Sure, totally.
So one of the big running jokes of the 90s for black comics was to talk about white people doing X and black people doing Y, right? It was usually white people have good credit, white people speak in a certain way, and that was considered white. Mm-hmm. Hold on. One second. So that was picked up from centuries of determining certain things were directly pertaining to white people and certain things were directly pertaining
to black stereotype people. What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's a racist stereotype.
But it was called white and it was called
When are you going to
black.
start measuring the skulls? Dialogue, Jesus!
No,
Like,
no,
what
but
are
I'm
you
not.
talking? This
No, no,
is
hold
what
on.
bugs me about CRT. How is this just not skull measuring of whites?
Because CRT isn't saying that's what it is. They're saying that's what it's called.
Yeah,
So
but it's a negative stereotype of white
sure,
people.
sure. It's an
Are you so
yeah.
you're basically saying all white people are this way? How racist is it to say all black people are this way?
Well, it's not white people are this way. This is how white people were presented by
Mhm,
others,
mhm.
and this is how black people were presented by others.
Yeah, but this is that look, I'm agreeing with you. In the 1950s and 60s, black people, like white people, had a stereotype of black people that wasn't even going to allow blacks to enter their public swimming pools. Okay. That was a stereotype that had to be overcome.
Hmm.
Like going back to those bad old days where we had stereotypes about every different community is probably not a step in the right direction.
Sure,
And
and
CRT is basically taking us back to those bad old days.
I I don't believe that.
Mhm.
I like I said, CRT is mostly pointing out why those stereotypes came out, not saying that those stereotypes are good or bad.
Mhm.
But again, that's what whiteness is supposed to be, pointing out the origins, pointing out why certain things are the way they are.
This is this is so I mean
I
you
mean,
can
and like I
take
said,
a
we'll disagree on that because you disagreed with Jangles on it, and
well, how is this any
deontologist.
different? Like you've talked about the 1350 stat that everyone brings out, specifically the white nationalists like to bring out. Do
Yes,
you acknowledge that they like to bring that stat out to make a stereotype about black people that they commit a lot of crime? That's the purpose that they're bringing that stat up for?
sure, but pointing that out that they
Do you
bring that
think
stuff.
do you think that negative stereotype type hurts the black community?
Sure, but again, pointing out people that make that stereotype isn't the same as saying that. And wait, okay, so
But well, I'm saying as a society, should we like engage? Should we promote those negative stereotypes? Should we engage in the promotion of those negative stereotypes, or should we um, work on preventing their spread?
I mean, work on preventing their spread. But I think the confusion here is I think you're saying, and I may be wrong. That's why I'm asking you. Are you saying that CRT is saying whiteness is or
Yes,
white?
CRT, and whether they do it deliberately or inadvertently is immaterial. The whole idea behind critical race theory is that you can do a racism accidentally because you can come up with a policy that results in racist results. That the racism was completely unintentional. So if you're acknowledging that as a critical race theory person, you have to acknowledge that even if they had the best intentions coming up with this whiteness stuff, that inadvertently they committed a racism. They committed a racism against white people by creating a stereotype that whites are privileged, oppressors, racists.
I mean, you can make that argument. I wouldn't say it's a fair argument, but you can make that argument. I would
Mhm.
say it would be more fair to look at it as okay, are they saying that these are what white people are, or are they saying this is how a
That's a
system.
semantic game. So it's just a
Well,
semantic game.
okay. I mean, sure. I mean, we can call it semantics, and that's why I do honestly believe that it shouldn't even be brought down because it's easy to take it a certain way. But the way it's being presented is not the same way as I think it's being absorbed. I
Yeah,
think
but
what
that's my point about it can be inadvertent and still be a problem.
sure we can kind of use that for anything. Like I mean, we can kind of lean towards almost any perspective on America and take it to its most extreme and say, oh, well, this is a problem. This should be a problem.
So that was that. Obviously, I don't think we're gonna agree here.
Yeah, no.
I don't think it ends well for the black community if we start a stereotype war, which I'm just worried we're going in that direction, because
I think that's our biggest disagreement, because I don't think this is as much a stereotype war as much as now
I think it very much is a stereotype war. Look at the guy who drove his SUV through the Christmas parade. Do you know why they're keeping the fact that guy was black out of the news? Why they're not mentioning any of that stuff?
I haven't seen that, but maybe I've been reading different articles, because most of the articles I see, they put the picture of him right up on the
okay, well, maybe
the screen. So I mean,
maybe it's an exaggeration on the right side.
Well, I would say I'm guessing they're waiting for more information, so they're saying stuff like SUV instead of saying crazy black guy. You know,
well, the reason
so I will admit that they would be a lot quicker if it was a white guy. They'd be a lot quicker to say white guy mowed down a bunch of people.
You know why?
I full on admit that.
Because progressives run the media, and they're working on, they want to destroy the black people are criminals stereotype and replace it with the white people are racist stereotype. So they're writing all of their articles to do that.
The only thing I would disagree with is that most of the media wants to do a white people are racist, but I definitely do see them trying to challenge the black people are criminals narrative.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely see that. But on the other side of that,
is it better to have a stereotype war or not have a stereotype war?
I mean, not have a stereotype war, but I don't think anybody's arguing to. I don't think anybody here, me, is arguing to continue a stereotype war. It's just
we're in a stereotype war, whether you acknowledge it or not.
Well, there's certain things that you see as a stereotype war that I disagree with you. I don't think it's a stereotype war. Sure.
Yeah, I know. That's how we disagree. But this video is not very long. And I have close to about 40 minutes, I'd say 45 minutes. So okay. I don't know how long you have.
I'm fine until however long you have.
Okay. So I'm super curious on your take on this video.
Okay.
This is obviously, it says national conservatism here. The Edmund Burke Foundation.
I'm so triggered. No, I'm joking.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get you triggered. If you're not triggered, maybe you can ham it up for the camera a bit. So just so people know.
Yeah.
Have you heard this guy before?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I haven't. I just heard him. I just was introduced to this guy recently. So,
ladies and gentlemen, I shall start with a quote that was brought to me by a gentleman I had dinner with last night, with an epigraph. Nemo me impune lacessit. No one attacks me with impunity, which was the Latin motto of the royal house, the Royal Stuart dynasty of Scotland from the reign of James VI. And the other one is an epigraph that I always start with any talk I give nowadays, especially in a search for America's new manifest destiny. The jungles are not approaching our cities, and the barbarians are not at the gates. The jungles have become our cities. The barbarians, well-heeled, in dresses, suits, and ties, are inside our cities. Whether we call them woke supremacists, critical race theorists, cancel culture enforcers, Black Lives Matters.
I wish I could make your face bigger, because I totally got some eye rolls going out of you there.
No, I'm just seeing where he's going.
Let me speak up if you want to. I mean, we're here to get your reaction. So
I will. I just, like I said, just out the gate, I'm like, oh, okay. Go like barbarians, cool. Let's see where he goes.
There is, I mean, there is an aspect of conservatism that is really worried about society falling apart. And I think this does fall under your stereotype of they're trying to preserve the status quo. No, the status quo you probably see in a bad light, but there is a positive way to see the status quo, that it's what is sustaining our society right now. I mean, it can always get much worse.
Well, it all depends on what we're talking about. But we'll go a little further and see what he means by this. But
okay,
yeah, it really does depend on what's trying to be preserved. That I think that I'd find a disagreement with.
Practitioners, Antifa, a vote about abolish of our Constitution, destroys of the First Amendment, this consecrated sacred house that is America and her chosen people are under attack by these civilizational terrorists. An offensive war has been declared against America and her unprecedented civilization. And all the traditional means of adjudicating disputes and truth claims, reason, logic, an appeal to empirical evidence, an appeal to objective reality, have been criminalized as a constructs of racist European imperialists. They have disarmed peaceful means of resolution, to say nothing of reconciliation. I think when in a war, one is under a moral obligation by the law of nature that arms aims.
Can I ask what's the theme of this conference? Like, is it just about conservatism, or
he's presenting? It's called Creating America's New Manifest Destiny. He's proposing a direction for conservatives in the future.
Okay, so there's not like a motivation. He's just kind of okay. Because I'm just wondering.
Well, no, the motivation is clear. It would be to say right now progressives are taking us in the wrong direction, and that we need to go in a different direction. Like all policy debates are really over what policies we're going to have in the future. So,
okay, all right, keep like
for self-preservation, to obliterate the enemy. And I think that one could further add that a bonus of war is to inflict generational damage against those who have infernal impertinence to attack us. The fight to this war and to win this war is not just to invoke a new McCarthyism, which will make the old McCarthyism look like kindergarten play. It is to devise a new
McCarthyism. I know this is. I mean, he's like coming out swinging here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It sounds like he's starting kind of like McCarthy, but then he's like, this isn't McCarthyism. So like, oh, okay, then what is this exactly?
Yeah, he does say a new McCarthyism that'll make the old McCarthyism look like kindergarten's play. I mean, yeah, it might come down to that. I'm telling you, people are not going to put up with this critical race theory. Like the backlash is basically going to be a new McCarthyism. He's trying to avoid that, though. You realize that?
Sure. Like, and again, that's why I want him to go a little further to explain what exactly he's talking about. Like, because right now, most of this sounds like pretty much the stuff that you'd hear if you turn on Fox News for about 5 or 6 seconds. So I hope he goes into a bit more detail of what he's talking about, and if this isn't just kind of all these groups are against us and let's destroy them. You know, if it's not just kind of banner waving, or if he has actual specifics that
he does. Yeah, it's great.
Challenge, yeah.
American manifest destiny, because America has lost its American mind. And it is infected by a set of ideopathogens from which we have no inoculants. I'm not talking about the 19th century doctrine or belief that the expansion of the US throughout the American continent was both justifiable, and inevitable. I'm talking about a new ethos, a new set of principles, and an orientation that will ameliorate and then inexorably rectify the current crisis that we are facing. The crisis of the United States consists in the United States having become uncertain of its purpose at home and abroad, having become uncertain of its moral meaning, its ethical telos, the mandates of its second chosen people who were called to fulfill its moral mission of civilizing the world at large. Part of the problem lies in the idea of pathogens against which we have ceased to inoculate ourselves against, but that's time for another talk. There is a frontier anxiety that we face. All of us, I think, in this great republic, this unprecedented republic of ours, were built for enormity, to suffuse our nation with an original assemblage of who we are as people, and to stopgap the frontier anxiety that we feel at this moment when it seems that all frontiers are for close to us, both physically, existentially, morally, and personally. We need a new manifest destiny. And the question is not, do we need a new manifest destiny? The question is, what will happen if we don't orient ourselves to a new one? We will not be left alone. We will get engulfed in the manifest destiny of other nations. China's manifest destiny is twofold. It is to economically annex, I think, a third of the globe, to suffuse the world implicitly with the spiritual and moral bankruptcy of a kind of spiritual emptiness that believes in selling the idea that man can live alone by consumption, and to implicitly suffuse the world with an ideology of communism. Iran, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, the three largest state sponsors of Islamic jihadism and terrorism, they have their own manifest destiny. Hamas has its own manifest destiny of establishing a global caliphate and eliminating Jewry and Jews from the world. And Russia, as we know, has a manifest.
I see you laughing, man.
Oh, I chuckled a bit because he said Saudi Arabia, and I'm wondering who in the audience kind of shuddered saying that, since we've been kind of giving Saudi Arabia millions of dollars for years now. So it's been a very right-wing policy to give Saudi Arabia money because they're supposed to be, I guess, our biggest ally. But he's very true that much of our terrorism comes from Saudi Arabia. So I just chuckled a bit.
Yeah, because we are giving money to the Saudi Arabian oppressors so that we can get their oil.
Sure. And that's why I kind of chuckled a bit, because I'm like, I wonder who in that audience kind of looked up and was like, leave Saudi Arabia alone, man. That's my money.
But are you in favor of foreign aid? Because foreign aid is terrible. Foreign aid is terrible for the people who live in these countries.
Well, there's good foreign aid and bad foreign aid. We do bad.
Basically all bad.
Well, no. How we do it is good and bad. So good foreign aid.
Let's not get diverted by foreign aid, but I'm just curious. You're in favor of some foreign aid. We can talk about it later.
Yeah, sure.
This destiny of toying with elected democracies across the world. So to begin the outlines of a new manifest destiny, I want to discuss very briefly two vectors which our manifest destiny must.
So he's basically saying the Russians have a manifest destiny. The Islamic states have a manifest destiny. The Chinese have a manifest destiny. Everyone in the world has a manifest destiny right now. And if we don't acknowledge the fact that they have certain goals that they're trying to achieve, we are going to become victims of their goals. Which, do you disagree?
No.
Okay.
I'm waiting for him to make the correlation, but sure. I'm with him on that part.
Proceed. That which we must eliminate and that which we must cultivate. If we're talking about all the muck that is going to be erected after a transracial world has been established, I think is necessary. I believe that we must begin to fight the battle comprehensively and stop fighting this battle piecemeal. We must become wholesalers and achieve a militaristic economy in our culture war, which means we stop going after the enemy like worker bees. We stop fighting these worker bees and we go after the hives. And we know where the hives are. The national security threat producing the enemies of the state, these annoying little worker bees that we're swatting, are the universities. They are producing the Americophobia and they're destroying American civilization. The greatest national threat to our system, to our great country, are the universities. They have become bastions not of learning, but bastions of indoctrination, whose sole purpose is to promote systemic nihilism and the destruction of values that are foundational to this country. They cancel human agency, and then history, and then the codified record of our foundational values and principles that are inoculants against destruction and the preconditions for growth and flourishing, all for the sake of ushering in a new world order, an anti-civilizational order, an anti-industrial Marxist communist order. If you want to know where the climate change eco-fascists who want to drag us back to primordial jungle swamps where we are competing with tsetse flies and man-eating tigers get their philosophy from, look to their postmodern atavistic professors. If you want to see where the Marxists trained Black Lives Matters and critical race theory woke activists, trained activists who vow to break up US banks, advocate the destruction of sacred Israel, destroy the nuclear family, and advance an agenda of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is an acronym for inverse racism, get their intellectual poison from, look to the American hating professorate.
I'm gonna cry, man. This is epic. Talk about your heroes and villains.
Yep. It's something, all right. No, I mean, he's right now. I mean,
well, you yourself said you weren't for the DEI stuff.
Sure. I mean,
he's calling it out right here.
I'm not for the DEI stuff, but I'll see where else he goes from this. But it was, he did a thing where I noticed he started going after some of the more localized things, and then he went to a complete world issue, and then he kind of turned a militaristic turn towards colleges and universities. So I'm seeing where he's going, and some of the things kind of don't seem to match up. Now maybe he'll link it later, or he'll close the link further on, but for right now it's just like, okay, this kind of seems a bit, just slapping things together.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see where this goes.
Their surrogates, the National Education Association, endorses the teaching of critical race theory in 14,000 public schools, along with an anti-Judeo-Christian agenda advanced by ethnic studies programs in California, and advocates returning stolen lands to indigenous peoples and force children to worship and pray homage to Aztec gods. You need to look to the professors of these departments. These creatures are not open to reason and logic, as I've said, because force and violence are their stated preferred means of fighting, and they must be met with force. And what do I mean by this? I mean expulsion, employment termination, since the left has taken it as their job through cancel culture to ruin the careers and to ruin the lives of innocent people. Then we must invoke the New Old Testament God and avenge ourselves against their transgression. We must begin the process of denaturalizing the citizenship of our enemies who come to this country, because immigration is not, speaking as an immigrant, immigration is not a right, it is a privilege.
Holy shit. He's saying these seditious professors, we need to revoke their citizenship.
Yeah, like,
well, he's not saying naturalize, if you're born in America, but he's saying a lot of the professors are actually immigrants themselves coming over and being anti-American haters, and that we should say, listen, we're taking back your citizenship, bro. Like, love America or get lost. You're American, right? You were born in America.
Yes.
Okay.
We must begin this process of employment termination of public servants who are producing enemies of the state and who act as enemies of the state as part of our manifest destiny. What must we cultivate? Well, let me debunk one damn shibboleth before moving on. There was no genocide in this country, and there was no stolen land. Simply put, there was a war for resources, and the Native Americans came in second. They simply lost the war. On June 2nd, 1924, Congress passed an Indian Citizenship Act, which granted citizenship to all Native Americans born in the United States of America. The American Indians stole the continent from the Holocene megafauna and slaughtered them into extinction. In a war for resources, this country fought a war and won it. We must first cultivate the political emotions of patriotic love of country, along with a new understanding of the civic virtues. And in some way, just as how the left has systematically taught our young to hate this country and its unprecedented civilization, we must cultivate a new ethos by re-ratifying our social contract we live by. We must outline the moral meaning of the United States of America, its exceptional nature, why it is an unprecedented phenomenon, in a non-apologetic way. We must begin the process of recovenanting ourselves as a chosen country and admit that we are a different iteration of a chosen people in a new chosen country destined to lead internally and abroad.
Remember when I said American exceptionalism and I did the air quotes?
Yeah, I know. That's why this is perfect for this video. The setup conversation for this video is great. That's why I'm curious.
That idealism is what I mean. And
why do you dislike American exceptionalism? I don't know how you can have a country that you don't foster some sort of exceptionalism in the people.
Well, again, I used air quotes because there's a specific type that, and it's a contradiction that he just mentioned that I wanted to point out. So when he said there wasn't a genocide that happened in the United States, it was a battle for resources and the Indians came in second place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Which means every battle is a battle for resources that have happened. So when we tell other countries that are battling for resources that they're wrong for battling for resources, but then we tell ourselves, oh, well, it's not a bad thing. We were battling for resources. It seemed like a contradiction, right?
Well, no, because the rules have changed. The UN has come in and made war illegal. We've changed the rules of the game.
So you're admitting, like, okay, so we've pretty much did a bunch of stuff all the way until.
Do you think changing those rules is bad?
I think changing those rules not as bad, but
I mean, making war illegal, I think, is probably a good thing. Dialogue.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm not making a bad or good argument. I'm saying it's incredibly convenient to basically say, well, anything before the Geneva Convention, you really can't talk about as a bad thing because, I mean, yeah, we did it and it's where we got to where we are. But if you talk about the negatives of it, you're just trying to make us feel bad. So you're making us feel guilty for what we did, and everybody did it at that time. But then the Geneva Convention happened, so now we get to kind of finger wave everyone else that tries to expand or tries to move anywhere because, I mean, we've made rules now, which is kind of like, well, it's kind of like we've got our cake. Now everybody else, you can't really get yours. And
there is a new system to get your cake. It's called capitalism. So people are still
in the United States. It's capitalism. Yeah. But outside the United States, where countries are dealing with other countries, it's mostly going to be some sort of warfare.
Well, so, between those countries, we're not involved in that.
Yeah, sure, but we definitely have a criticism when other countries are saying, well, we don't have access to a certain resource. There's a group here that has access to that resource. We want that resource, so we're going to move in to that country. And if it's just a battle for resources and we have no play in it, according to him, how he thinks, or according to his words, we really shouldn't have an issue with it.
Well, I'm not sure how that's super relevant to the topic at hand, and as far as like internal sedition in the United States, I think is mostly what he's he's bringing this up as a point to say that there are people who want to cast our history against us, and that is not a wise thing to do. That we have bigger fish to fry in the international community, and infighting is standing in the way of that.
Sure, but this is what happens that now that more people are allowed to talk. Now that more people are allowed to talk, more people have access to gigantic microphones, you're going to hear more sides to certain things that you wouldn't have heard before.
Mm-hmm.
So now that there's so many different sides, it's inevitable that certain sides that were silenced are going to start coming out to the world. So it makes more sense to accurately teach history earlier on.
That it's a completely different issue, though.
Okay.
Well, it's a different issue because you're talking about freedom of speech and actually indoctrinating children. I mean,
well, and again, that's where I kind of have a disagreement, because I see it as what he's doing is, and I see a lot of people on the right do this. They are hyper focused on these very questionable things that are happening in schools that fully on admit.
mm-hmm.
And then they widen out to cover actual like things that were silenced in American history that we're starting to find out more and more about. And they're putting that all under this label of anti-Americanism. And that's where you have a lot of people, especially like me on the left, where I'm seeing like, no, this actually happened. I don't care how you feel about it. This actually happened. And those people are starting to be able to talk about it.
But do you deny that there are anti-American people that are developing teaching programs specifically aimed at demoralizing white children in the same way that racists in the 50s and 60s were aimed at aimed their efforts at demoralizing black children that were forcibly integrated into their schools?
Well, I can't deny it, because I'm sure it's happening. Is it happening a lot, or something that I could see as a national emergency or something like that? No, I'm not seeing that at all. But is it happening in certain areas? Yes. Is it happening and being used as a cudgel? I'm seeing that a lot more.
Well, I'm not sure how big the problem is, but it is a problem. And
sure,
even if it's a tiny problem, the time to deal with the tiny problem is early on, before it is 50% of these teachers.
Oh, okay. A lot of arguments are made like that, but sure. I mean, I guess. Yeah.
Do you agree? You seem to agree with me that there is a bit of a stereotype war going on here.
And again, it really depends on what you mean.
I mean that there are people like developing negative stereotypes about white people, negative stereotypes about American history, aimed at demoralizing people for revenge and racism.
The first part, you have a maybe for me, but I don't think that's ever been new. Like I said, black comics have been making those jokes for years. The black community have been making that jokes for years. The white community has been making that jokes for years. And I think
what are the jokes? I'm not sure.
I mean, white people have good credit, black people have bad credit. Those type of jokes have been going on for years, and that's mostly because of isolation.
This is like a comic in a nightclub talking to adults and teaching children in schools. We don't even allow advertising certain products to children.
Well, we just moved because you were talking about stereotypes. If we're talking about stereotypes, then those stereotypes have existed for a long time.
Well, the stereotypes,
schools.
The path of the stereotype is to teach it in school, so the person takes it with them their entire lives.
Sure. And like I said, the stuff that we can find of teachers doing stuff like that, yeah, sure. I don't see that nearly at the level that it's being presented. I do see the
So
exact opposite,
triggering.
though.
It's so triggering when you say that, because
I
it doesn't matter the level. You're basically saying, yeah, it'll be when will it be a problem for you?
well, no, I'm saying it in the sense of address the problems when it happens.
No, it is a
But
problem
wait,
at any level. That's what I'm saying.
But what I'm saying is address it as in, like, if a teacher's teaching that and we find the teacher teaching that, fire said teacher.
Mhm.
But blanket firing a bunch of people because something might be taught that you can't prove is happening,
Listen,
which
if
is actually happening, that's a problem.
if you knew of a white teacher in the South that was teaching the 1350 all black people are criminals stereotype to sixth graders,
Fire
you
that
would
teacher.
lose your fucking shit.
Yeah, I would fire, but I would work to fire that teacher. What I wouldn't do is go to the next city over and fire somebody that
But you have like the National Association of Teachers saying we should teach this, which how is that any different than Jim Crow?
no, that's okay. So when we get to the National Association of Teachers, National Association of Teachers, I'm trying to remember which one you're talking about, because there's one that says teaching CRT in aspect of, and I remember I think I talked to one of the on Twitter. I talked to one of the people that did MythCon about this, and we started looking at what they were talking about introducing, and most of it was the tenets of CRT. It wasn't like the deep stuff. So
You don't have the COVID, do you, Dialogue? You're coughing a lot over there.
I just have a cold.
Are you sure?
Yeah, no. I just have a cold. So again, like there's a lot of specifics that need to be looked at before grabbing our torches and pitchforks. And I don't think a lot of people are doing that. I think a lot of people
I'm not suggesting that we should grab our torches and pitchforks. I'm saying prudent public policy is in order. We have a bunch of, like, the anti-CRT laws are being promoted on the fact that like we already have a bunch of anti-discrimination laws. So they're basically an extension of anti-discrimination laws aimed at white people. And I believe in the Florida bill, they actually talk about negative stereotypes.
Sure. Like I said, a lot of the bills, and see, there's a difference between the bill, how it's presented, and what actually comes out. And I think we had this conversation before too, because what seems to be happening, except for I think it was like Utah's anti-CRT bill is insane. But what's happening is it's being presented as this, like, by the people who are pushing the law, is being presented as like this overreaching, insane catch-all on teachers. And then the bill comes out and it's just like, oh, well, don't tell teachers it's a bad thing to be white, or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, that's not how you initially started the fight. Like, if it's just, hey, we're challenging this one teacher and this was messed up, so we're making a law for this one or for these teachers that are doing this, yeah, sure. But the way it's been pulled into the national conversation, it sounded like you wanted to start regulating how history was being taught. What parts of history or aspects of history were being allowed. Texas did this too, to where they had their Senate Bill 3 and they had the HRB, I think HR Bill like 1070 something. The initial writing of Senate Bill 3 was like starting to really regulate what parts of America, of Black history, are going to be in schools.
We have to come up with a shared. We have to hammer that out together. You're killing the ears of our audience.
Let me grab some water.
Yeah, get some water. I'll read some super chats. Sorry, guys. Let me see here. Cullivar for $5 says, Dialogue. That's because A-Team reigns supreme, and we get at the heart of the situation, as where S-Class likes to eat paint chips and violate Squirrel. What does that mean? Cullivar, what does that mean? Derek Drummond for $5 says, Jangles got defensive because he knew he couldn't compare to Adam's masterful debate skills. All aboard the A train, and a choo-choo avatar. What is that? An emoji, a choo-choo emoji. Alex Karras for $5 says, oh, sweet. I got a free 5 SC. I got a free 5 SC. Here you go, Adam. I pay nothing and you get everything. Does this mean that I am giving you my free will? Well, you're getting free will back, because that for that $5 super chat here on Thursday nights, you get 10x free will. That's 50 units of free will. Now you only get 5 units of free will on the Sunday show. Here you get 50 units of free will. I mean, why aren't you on Thursday night? This is where you come to stock up on the free will. Of course, it's not cut with anything. Are you okay now?
Yeah.
we have to develop a curriculum that is not going to be aimed at creating negative stereotypes of white people or black people. It's not,
sure.
That's not healthy.
Sure, but I'm less concerned with how people feel about how history is taught, rather than just teach the history.
This is so ridiculous.
Well,
you can cherry pick history to teach anything you want.
I think that's destructive, and I think, and to be honest,
but that's what the CRT people are doing.
Sure. I mean, I'm stepping away. Like, I'm not really giving the CRT argument on this one. I'm just giving how badly American history has been taught, and because of how bad American history has been taught, how much easier if there are these horrible, scary Marxist professors that are manipulating our kids into certain things. Part of it, and this is from talking to a lot of people, part of it is they get taught a very, very heroes and villains, bad version of history early on. They get to college, they start learning more and more of the specifics of how certain things got to the way they are. They become disenfranchised with the United States and become more susceptible to far more radical people. If you tell the truth in the beginning, if you give...
I'm not clear on what you're saying. You're saying history is teaching, like, this is before CRT. History was taught in this whitewashed way where they go to college and they don't like America, or they do like America.
They go to college with an idea of American history that gets easily disproven by looking further and further
by communist professors. Continue.
Sure. I mean, but like I said, even
by American hating professors that have cherry picked history to highlight all of the most terrible aspects of America. I mean, how is it not cherry picking either way?
Well, why again? And sorry, why not just why not tell the truth from the beginning? So
it's all true. Don't you understand? This is how you can.
A lot of this isn't. A lot of it, and again, a lot of it in high schools and stuff like that aren't even full. Like, they're not true, and they're not really the truth. A lot of it is like a hero and villain. We're leaving a whole lot of it out of it. A whole lot that people find out is like, okay, well,
so you're saying it's a lie by omission, which means the parts that are being taught are true, but they're leaving stuff out.
Yes.
CRT seeks to do the exact same thing. They want to leave other parts out, but they want to include the really nasty stuff so that you walk away with negative stereotypes about white people.
So let's, and again, we'll disagree on that, but let's move a step further. So in order for that to stop, you could do one of two things. You can eliminate all the Marxist professors and whatever else, and whoever you're accusing of Marxism, and do a second coming of McCarthyism, which he says he's not doing, but this sounds like the second coming of McCarthyism, or it does.
He's warning you about the second coming of McCarthyism,
no,
which is going to be a lot worse. That's what he's saying.
No, he's saying that I'm not offering McCarthyism, and then he goes into offering McCarthyism. Or you could properly teach these kids what happened, be honest about it from the very beginning. That way, when they get into colleges and they find out about the more negative aspects of American history, it's not being overwhelmed. And it's because these people are young. They're between the ages of 18 and 22. These are young kids who are learning all of this heroes and villain shit in middle school and high school, and are coming into, okay, this is the real actions that have happened, and they're becoming disenfranchised by it. And if there is, I'm not saying there is or there isn't, if there is or isn't a group of Marxist professors who are just trying to control these kids by using the negative aspects of American history, wouldn't it make more sense for these kids to know the negative aspects of American history to be able to anticipate learning about it?
No.
So you just don't want them to know about it at all?
I don't want kids to go to school and come out of the school with negative stereotypes of any person, any people. I don't want them to come out of school with negative stereotypes of any race, religion, anything. I think school should be completely neutral. And the whole point of CRT is to take over history and pick and choose from history a narrative that makes Americans hate themselves. That's the whole point of it.
I mean, we're going to disagree on that. Does that mean, like,
I don't feel like we are disagreeing, because you're basically saying, wouldn't it? You're ascribing a different motivation to it. You're saying we should teach the nasty parts of history. The stereotypes are just a byproduct, but it's true, so we should. No, and the reasoning that you're giving is because, well, they're going to encounter it in college anyway, and we don't want to do a bait and switch on them. Well, first of all, not all kids go to college, so the kids that don't go to college are not going to encounter that. Not all kids go to some Ivy League school where they're a bunch of Marxist professors that are trying to make them as anti-American as possible. Some of them go to nice Christian colleges where they don't teach this nonsense.
Okay. But like, again, our initial back and forth over whiteness, like you steadily are saying it's stereotypes. I'm steadily saying it's not.
Right. So you disagree with the idea that it's a stereotype, that it's creating a stereotype.
I fully disagree that with the proper usage of whiteness is a stereotype. Mm-hmm. I fully disagree with that. Mm-hmm. But I mean,
and you don't think inadvertently it's creating stereotypes?
Anything can inadvertently create a
stereotype. So then you do agree that it's inadvertently creating stereotypes?
Well, anything can, like, that's what I'm saying. Anything can inadvertently create a stereotype.
Right. I agree.
But that's not the fault of the word that is accurately being used.
But we either try to manage that as a society, or we just throw up our hands and say, okay, well, we created a bunch of stereotypes, of negative stereotypes about white people, and now we're creating a bunch of white nationalists because of it.
Or we could just stop coddling people, be honest about what happened in the United States, and let people be able to anticipate stuff like this.
No, we're fundamentally going to disagree over this. Let's get back to the video. Let's finish out the video.
Sure.
Here I will part from my paleoconservatives compatriots. America is not an NGO. In the global anarchical commons, there must be an alpha leader, a supreme one to whom others will follow by moral example. I will say that there was a time when the mention of the name USA, I remember as a child growing up in Jamaica, when the mention of the word USA induced an emotion of both admiration, fear, and love. One pinned one's aspirational identity on America. At the age of 7, I decided I wanted to become an American, left Jamaica at 20, and became an American at around the age of 30. The world feared and loved America. And some ghastly phenomenon who called himself the President of the United States of America a couple years ago went on an apology tour in Cairo, beginning in Cairo, I think, and talked about apologizing for American exceptionalism, leading from behind, and soft power. We have never recovered since then. Each American must feel that he or she can manifest his or her manifest destiny in this great nation and not feel stifled by political correctness and also by the moral agenda of lesser people. We must vet those who seek to be part of our culture. Part of the problem of liberalism is that it lets everyone into the future. It is both the greatness and the weakness of liberalism. And unfortunately,
It's both the greatness and the weakness of liberalism.
Not everyone can be let into the future. We cannot let social ballasts, we cannot let ignoble junk into this country. We have to engage on a more thorough and ruthless vetting process, and some people will be left outside the realm of the future. In closing, I was rewatching a part of The Crown in which Queen Mary said something to Queen Elizabeth about the role of monarchy. And I will twist a little bit on what she said and say it in the spirit of what I think is America's role in terms of cultivating a new manifest destiny. America is God's sacred mission to grace and dignify the earth, to give ordinary people an ideal to strive towards, an example of nobility and duty to raise them in their humble lives. And to live as a patriotic American is a vocational calling from God. Thank you.
Aren't you proud to be an American now?
I mean, I've never not been proud to be an American.
Well, it's good to hear you say that. It's good to hear you say that.
Okay. I mean, like I said, like just being proud to be an American, that's doesn't mean you can't criticize it or you can't criticize certain aspects of it. I think there's a lot of people that make that connection. Like, in order to be proud of America, you have to silence your own criticisms towards certain things. You have to just accept certain things happening. And it's like, no, you could be proud of America
dialogue.
And still have...
There's a giant difference between being able to speak out about the things that you find deficient about America and indoctrinating every school child with the idea that America is founded on hatred and oppression. There's a giant difference there. There's like a vast gulf between those two positions.
Okay. I mean, I didn't make that claim, but sure.
Right, but there are people who do want every school child in America to learn that America was founded on oppression and hatred.
Sure, and there are people that want their children to learn that the South was fighting for their own freedom and it had nothing to do with slavery at all. And I mean, lost cause ideology.
Haven't those people been sidelined though?
Probably in schools, there's more lost cause ideology than there is CRT.
Overseer's Log for $50 says, I have a bachelor's of science degree in history, and nobody's history is sunshine and rainbows. I oppose CRT as much as I oppose lost cause or religious-based education because they are agenda-based, not education-based. Good and bad must be taught, but neutrally. So Overseer's Log, thank you very much for the $50, and I completely agree with that. And that's what I'm arguing here. Dialogue is neutrality.
Sure, but it wasn't neutral. Like, it's still not really being neutral. So I would say that there are definitely negative aspects of CRT that are teaching people that to hate themselves because they're white, and we can argue about how prevalent it is in the schools. But what I can definitely say is that the United States, for a long time, in order to push an American exceptionalist version of history, has been very deficient in a lot of things that should be taught in American history.
You already agreed, though, that the good and bad can be taught and still teach American exceptionalism. You already agreed that American exceptionalism is still exists, even though we have had both good and tragedy.
Sure, but there's a reason why I continue to use air quotes, because I'm talking about a specific version of American exceptionalism where it's heroes and villains, and it stifles certain parts of history, which has been done. So
Well,
if we're going to talk about CRT and talk about how certain people are taking stuff too far and teaching kids to hate themselves, sure, but then you can't not acknowledge that for years there has been this desire to teach a very
I'm not sure that I buy into that, but
and that's the problem. That's where so many people are having issues with the other half of America.
well, but I think here's why I have the issue, because I went to public school. Okay, I grew up and was participated in that, and I don't feel like I got a whitewashed version of history. Now I know, in the South during the 1960s, they probably did get something like that. I feel like things have changed and been updated, and we've gone from a neutral view of history, which I was taught, to a hate America view of history.
We've never been taught a
kids
neutral,
are being taught.
And see, that's where, I mean, like you said, if you want to trigger me, that's where to trigger me. We've never been taught a neutral version of history. That is a blatant, bold-faced lie.
Well, we're gonna have to. I only have about 5 minutes left. I got to tear through these super chats, but we can definitely have this conversation again if you're gonna bury the hatchet with my boy Sitch. I can't be hanging out with you. I can't be hanging out. Like, listen.
Tell you what, this is what
I would not be happy right now if Sitch was doing a live stream with Jangles the fucking liar. Okay, like if that's the way, if that's your relationship with Sitch, like, nice knowing you, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but this is like,
we'll do a hatchet burying conversation. We'll do me and Jangles can talk to you and Sitch. You bury the handles with hatchet.
I'm not burying. Jangles is a lying piece of shit, though. I'm not burying the hatchet with Jangles. Okay.
I'll put my hatchet right next to yours.
I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think you and Sitch could bury the hatchet. And I retweeted some. You had a take on Kyle Rittenhouse where you were calling Vadim out. I retweeted it just to show, okay, this guy's not totally unsalvageable here. At least he's willing to call Vadim out for compare. Vadim was comparing Kyle Rittenhouse to like the guy who walked into the church and just killed a bunch of black people. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? That is not the Kyle Rittenhouse situation.
That's the funny thing about it, is like a lot of people on the right are like, yeah, he's for the left. And I'm like, a lot of leftists don't like me. Like, I for all the anger I have towards Sitch, I absolutely do not like Christy Winters.
Yeah.
Like we have. Oh, well, fuck.
You just made my day.
So yeah, like that, I have just as many disagreements with people on the left, if not more, than that I do on the right. But
okay.
Yeah, I'm more than willing to talk to the guy, but I don't think I just don't like how Sitch presents himself. I don't like how Sitch, like a lot of the things Sitch does just irks the hell out of me. Because I feel like
everything you do irks the hell out of me. I can I don't.
But we can talk about it. Sitch does this thing to where he says a bunch of stuff about somebody.
Well, no, let's not talk shit while Sitch isn't here, because that's not going to help the situation.
Yeah, no, and that's understandable.
We'll see if we can work it out. Colabar for $5 says progressives are like little children with big imaginations of new things while not knowing history. Traditionalists are always right, not biased. Look at that. Cullivar coming out strong. Derek Drummond for $5 says, why do they call it whiteness and not blackness? Because they want to create negative stereotypes about white people.
Blackness is a thing, though.
It is, but blackness is considered cool, really. I mean, let's be honest here.
Depends on how it's used, but nah, there's a lot of aspects of blackness that's not cool at
Don't complain about the rules. Y'all were losing before them, and it made us feel bad. So we came up with rules so y'all wouldn't be stamped into the dust. Who is that? Who rules for who? I'm not sure who he's talking about there. Mr. Tickle Trunk for 10 Canadian says, critical theory is useful academic tool used in academic settings where multiple tools are used at once. CT is a mostly flawed tool. I think you mean CRT. CRT is a mostly flawed tool though useful, which is destructive when used to look at race. Oh, maybe he does mean CT. Maybe he means critical theory. Critical theory is a mostly flawed tool, though useful, which is destructive when used to look at race. Well, I think, Mr. Tickle Trunk, I probably agree with you there. Like, I don't think CRT is good for racial relations at all, which I think I've made clear here. Mr. Tickle Trunk for 5 Canadian says, this mostly flawed tool's conclusions should not be taught to children because it's so specific. It's only used in academic settings, never with race. Now I'm wondering, Mr. Tickle Trunk, if I should be reading this sarcastically. Maybe use the sarcasm thing. Stug for $2 says, what history isn't being taught? Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. What history are we missing?
Sure. For example, the reason why the Spanish-American War happened, the actual reason why the Spanish-American War happened.
What was the actual reason?
The actual reason was just expansionism. But the reason presented in a ton of history books was the sinking of the Maine.
Well, wait a second. But we have a whole chapter on manifest destiny. So why are we sugarcoating it? Why are we not teaching? Why are we teaching? Yeah, expansion to take out the Native Americans, but then all of a sudden, no, we can't. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, because there's a lot of stuff that it's harder to make heroes and villains out of. Like the War of 1812 is a good example of that. Like a lot of the stuff, or the Pig War. If you go into certain aspects of history and you start finding out why certain things happen, if you only look at it as heroes and villains, the United States looks like a villain. But you shouldn't teach it like heroes and villains. You should teach it as this is what happened. That way you don't see it and read it as the United States is a villain or the United States is a hero, and see it as this is just an action that the United States did.
I remember them teaching us about Jim Crow in public schools, and we were definitely, the South was definitely the fucking villains. Okay. They didn't sugarcoat it for me.
I mean, I didn't say Jim Crow, but sure, we can.
They talked about literacy tests and how the literacy tests were completely unfair. You know, whites had an oral literacy test to vote, and blacks got a written literacy test to vote. That doesn't quite seem fair. I'm not exactly sure.
But how many? If we're going to talk about that time period, how many history books talk about the racial aspects of inner city buildings in order to house poor blacks?
Well, the redlining thing, I don't remember anything specific about. So
not specifically redlining. I mean, like building these large, like some cases poorly built, multi-family buildings.
Yeah, no, the project. I lived in Louisiana. I know what the projects look like.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's fucking awful.
Did any of the history books talk about the motivations and the reason why, and the laws created in the cities surrounding it to prevent those projects from happening anywhere but that particular area?
They taught about the filling in of the public swimming pools. Once the federal government said you can't have, whites only swimming pools, rather than letting black kids swim in the swimming pools, they filled them in with concrete. They taught all that shit. Okay.
Oh, okay. Just give me this.
Mr. Tickle Trunk for 5 Canadian says critical theory is supposed to be used in tandem with 1,000 other tools to analyze, but not for solution finding because it creates a grievance spiral. Okay, now I know it. Yeah, it's sad. Brain for $2 says slavery, Jim Crow, Tulsa. What is being left out?
I mean, I gave a few examples, but sure.
The Spanish War, you said, was being left out. That's
like just explaining why the Spanish War happened and removing the hero and villain aspect of it from it. Just why it happened.
Because we wanted manifest destiny. We wanted more land.
Sure. And teach it as that.
It's not a
Don't
secret
teach
though.
it.
Like
No,
I
no, no.
just
It was
said,
taught. The Spanish American War was taught as the Maine was bombed, and then we invaded Spain. That's how it was
Day
taught
one.
for years.
Day one in American history in public schools. Manifest destiny. Sea to shining sea. It's even in our song.
But Adam, you can't see the difference between teaching, just saying manifest destiny early on in the history book, and then saying, "Oh, the Maine was bombed. This is why the Spanish American War happened." Farther down the line, you can't see how that's not really teaching what happened.
I think it's. I think you're driving me crazy. Ergo Games for $10 says, "What does dialogue mean by honest? You both are talking about teaching truth, but there is a difference in each of your understandings of the other's use of honest." Well, I think we did iron that out in that he's saying we're lying by omission, that we are teaching true things that happen, but dialogue is making the argument that we're leaving out stuff that doesn't paint white people bad enough for him. Mr. Tickle Trunk for 10 Canadian says, American kids were already being taught history in a way that was appropriate for children, nonpartisanly and based on scientific study. We can't throw that out for a new non-tested one because we like it. Yeah, I agree, Mr. Tickle Trunk.
Yeah, that's a lie, Mr. Tickle Trunk.
Oh my God.
That's a lie. I'm sorry, but no.
Fondue for $20 says, when I went to public school, we watched two movies, Glory and Gone with the Wind. Our teacher asked us to notice the way African Americans are interpreted. CRT would let you believe that glory doesn't exist. CRT would be anti-glory. I've never seen the movie Glory, but
yeah, I gotta see that. I gotta see that writing somewhere.
Thank you for the $20. Malcolm McKinney for no more super chats, guys. I really got it run. Malcolm McKinney for 5 Canadian says, have you guys watched interview from the other day where Gavin McGinnis is praised by Guzo Kunzo, who now says he finds more common ground with the right? No, I haven't seen that.
Is that the Black Hitler guy?
I'm not sure. Is it? Maybe. That's crazy. Mr. Tickle Trunk for, I'll have to look that up. Thanks for the recommendation. Mr. Tickle Trunk for 10 Canadian. Mr. Tickle Trunk, man, you're just, thanks for the super chats. CT Critical Theory. I'm being serious. It's useful in academic circles in a small number of cases. My point is that it's a screwdriver, not even a hammer. Turn it into CRT and we all get screwed. Okay, so I do agree with you there, and I think I made this point on the Sunday show that, you know, the whole idea that we can be committing inadvertent racisms, I think, has some merit to it. And at the same time, if you notice, my argument is we can be committing inadvertent racisms towards white people too, even though dialogue is not willing to accept that is probably what's going on here. Azrael for $5 says, former teacher here. Maybe Georgia is progressive, but we teach it was American expansionism that led to the war. Check the standards. So he's saying that they do teach it the way that you're saying they should teach it. Yeah, American expansionism.
I can't speak to his exact school. I just know for a fact that I've seen multiple books up here in Ohio, and they still put the sinking of the Maine as the reason for the war.
Hey, Triple J, I said no more super chats. Overseer's Log for $5 says, I think a lot of people's perspective on how people are educated is largely based on where they live and who taught them. That could be true because I did grow up in California, but I did grow up in a more conservative area of California. So Triple J for $4.99 says CRT pedagogy is exactly heroes and villains. Only America is the villain instead of the hero. No better than what you are complaining about. Here. I said no more super chats, but I actually am very thankful that you did say that super chat. Do you have a final response to the super chat before we log off?
Oh, I mean, I just disagree, but yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, thank you for talking to me though. This was cool. This was
well,
cool.
hopefully we can bury the hatchet with Sitch. I don't like, obviously. Sitch is a great guy. You guys should get along. So,
and Jangles is a cool dude. You guys should get along.
well, I mean, if Jangles is willing to give up his lying and dishonest ways, I'm all for burying the hatchet. I don't carry grudges, but Jangles needs to like not retweet fucking out of context shit so he can get some fucking internet likes.
Well, like I said, I'm
gonna
hold off on my criticisms of Sitch.
Well, we'll see if we can get something together.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining in. Thank you guys for the super chats. We'll see you all next week when I debate Aiden Paladin on this fucking monarchism bullshit. What the hell? What the hell? So get ready. Aiden Paladin destroyed next
Leave
Thursday.
the alcohol alone, Aiden. All right.
Bye-bye.